Let's say there is a what I call a German person. That means he would be a German born in Germany, has a mindset of a German, thinks German. It's a bit different. He does not have the exposure of coming from Russia, for example, of not having the exposure of having parents who had some, suffering behind them. So that's a kind of a different brand of people. You have Germans, you have the people with the background that is in Russia, and then you have, I find, another kind of a German that has a background, maybe in Russia or in a different part of the Eastern Bloc, but they are churchgoers. They have a strong Christian affiliation, and they don't necessarily mingle with the other groups. So I don't have a difficulty to go into either of those groups, because I think I've been exposed to all of them, and that's because of my background. But there's a big difference between those people. It's almost worlds apart, yeah. And they don't necessarily communicate with each other either.
I mean, it's a different culture. I mean, there's, it is not as different as a culture in Africa versus European culture. Obviously, it's a Anglo-Saxon Germanic background culture, so to speak. But if you start separate those cultures into subcategories, almost it is distinctly different. It's like you cannot mistake one culture for the next. If you live within those different cultures, somebody from maybe completely like a South American country might say, well, seems to be all the same, but it's, in my experience, it is not. It's again, the whole Mennonite Low German background, which is more a Northern European, Northern Germany, Holland kind of, that's where Mennonite Siemens and the entire Mennonite movement started from. It's sort of, that culture stayed unique because it moved out from that society or from that part of the world to Russia and stayed in segregation or stayed by itself for hundreds of years and maintained its own, sort of had its own evolution as a culture. So there's certain food groups, there's a certain, the whole language itself, like Low German. People that speak German can understand Low German, but it's not necessarily the same. It's a dialect. So there is definitely differences, and as I mentioned, the whole friendliness and everything else of the Mennonite culture and the Canadian combination sort of that came with it in Southern Manitoba was very unique to us, because the ethnic German culture is nothing like it, nothing like our Mennonite or Mennonite Canadian culture of friendly and welcoming. We did not experience that at all in my experience in Germany. The first families, yeah, because there was, as I said, there was very few of us, so often to move your belongings and stuff like that, or from Germany to Canada, some of us shared, like, you rent a sea container to move all your stuff in. So some families shared containers and stuff like that just to make it more efficient and cost efficient. And since there were only very few people, you get to know them quite easily, and word spread who's the new people coming. So we were more of a close-knit group first on, and you kind of you have a family more or less.
Well, it is interesting when we meet, and we have, especially Mennonites from here, when they moved from Ukraine or Russia back then, we have, sometimes we have the same dishes, like the same food, the same experiences kind of thing. It's interesting. It's, yeah, so far we're enjoying it. And my son has only Canadian friends, and they talk to each other about stuff like that too. And it's, yeah, we kind of have this same history, most of us, so it's very interesting.
I think then there's also the difference between now and now and then, 1998 to now, is also there's a huge core of people that speak either Russian or Russian German and High German, so people don't feel as compelled to learn English as they did before. In fact, we interviewed a young man who said to us, and he was about 18, he said he came here when he was 16, and at first he was kind of upset with his parents for bringing him here. He thought he had a pretty good life. where he was living. But his parents wanted a better life for him in terms of opportunities, for jobs, and because they were struggling with, you know, what will his future be? And so a lot of the parents moved in for their kids. What this young man said to us was also, now that he'd been living here, he was really happy that they'd come when they'd arrived, because he had been in that first wave and had developed a lot of Canadian friendships, which he really valued. He says the ones that are coming now and finding a great pocket of people who speak their same language, and so they're not necessarily having an opportunity to meet Canadian-born people. And from his perspective, he thought that was too bad, because it's the integration piece of settlement that's so important. People who have been here have of German background many of those were the first host families and volunteers, right? Because of that kind of tie. So that was I think that's important.
I actually have a friend who has been in Canada for, I think, almost her whole life. She's my age, but they moved when she was 6 years old or something. She is very more integrated, because she said when they moved there were barely any Germans here. She speaks the language, you couldn't notice, besides her clothing, that she would be German. But besides that, I don't really know any people from different waves. I just noticed that the people who didn't come with that big wave of Germans that came all at once, who were by themselves, so to say, they integrated way faster. And now some Germans who are here as long as I am, they still barely speak the language, and they're still sticking with what they know. You know, they don't try different things, even different food, they don't try that. They stick with their meats and potatoes, and yeah.
The ones that are coming lately, or have come lately, already have connections to the churches. There are some huge churches that the people who have immigrated here have built and populate, you know, to the tune of 500 to 600 or 700 members. And so while that's great for them, they've and I think, you know, it's the freedom to live here and do what they would like to do in terms of worshiping and where they live and where they work, does attract new ones to come, because they know that they have a place to come to. On the other hand, doesn't necessarily foster integration with the rest of the community, because many of the activities in the church are held throughout the week. So they're this first generation, I guess I would say, of people that are coming here will stick together. And I understand that totally. It's a comfort thing. We were talking about this the other day. If you decided to move to Spain and you didn't really have a lot of Spanish language, and you found a community that was all Canadians and English, where would you go? That would be the place. That would be your home till you found your way. The next generation will be different, right? Their kids have been in the school system. They've developed friendships and relationships with the larger community. So we see that some of the churches have already split, and there's one or two more large churches that have been built. But I think that's sort of a natural. We've seen that in the Mennonite church history prior to this, right? All the different Mennonite churches that exist. If I would just use that as an example.
What I also noticed about families is that they kind of push their children to do everything for them. Like when we moved here, I was sort of the person in the family who spoke the most English, so I was kind of pushed to insurance, income tax, all of that stuff, and I was trying to figure it out myself. So, but then they were still pushing me to do everything. And I mean, I understand why my parents did that, because it's scary for them to be in a country they don't understand. But when you're 16 years old or younger even, and everything is new for you, it's not very nice to be pushed for all the legal stuff. So I remember a story when we actually moved to Canada and we had that layover. We were in, I think it was Chicago, and we had to wait for an hour and we had to clear customs. And there was a guy and he started talking to my mom in English and my mom didn't understand. So she was pointing at my sister and then my sister looked at her and then she was pointing at me. And then I had to go and figure out what that guy wanted. And they, you know, Americans are very fast English talking people, so I was kind of scared because I thought we did something wrong, but he didn't talk English any slower or anything like that. So eventually I figured out what he wanted, but things like that, just, I don't know. I think it's good for families to have somebody who speaks their language and English to help them in things like that. So that's why we have our settlement workers, but lots of people keep pushing their children, and I don't think that's necessary. I know of people who have 7, 8-year-old children who do that, so.
We've got integration workers. We actually call them integration workers. So their job is really to do some information orientation sessions for newcomers, try to make connections to them, for them to existing organizations. So, for example, the library. We'll help them get a library card. We do a multicultural Christmas celebration with the library here, so people can share their cultural experiences in that season and also learn about what happens in Canada. And there are interesting things that are coming up, which are related to winter activities. So in Morden, we're partnering with that community to host the Winter Fest. And it's a day of celebration with skating and making bannock and sleigh rides and ice hockey. And so people can learn about what we do in this frosty winter for fun outside. And so another piece that we're doing is trying to do cooking classes. So how do you learning, but always trying it reciprocal. It's not okay, you're in Canada, this is how we cook. It's more about, this is what we are doing. How does this compare to what you do? And so then the next cooking lesson might be from Philippines. Who knows, right? So it's trying to make connections and build those networks for people.
It is one of the things, if you find that integration is very easy, it seems like you tend not to hold on to things that you originally believed were so very important. Because if integration is so easy, if people don't like you, if people I don't know, point you out and don't let you integrate in the society, you tend to hold on and become even more insulated faster. Versus in the Canadian society, and Manitoba and Southern Manitoba especially, the integration is so easy, and lots of people have such similar ideologies about life what you do, that integration is very easy. So I would believe, well, because my kids were both born here, you would not be able to pick them out in the classes being different than anybody else. But then again, if I would move my family maybe to a different province, they might stick out more than versus in this community where we live. So integration in this community has been very easy. It's, in general terms, the beliefs and the values of this society match what I believe and my values. So they've integrated very well into this particular community.
I'm very excited about the volunteer program that we've just started developing, and that's since September, October. Trying to connect people who may not have Canadian job experience, who may still be working on their language, but trying to connect them to a volunteer opportunity. They have an opportunity to meet somebody who's Canadian. They have an opportunity to practice their English outside of the classroom, which is maybe very classroom-led or teacher-led, where this might get them out to the community and help them with their integration process. So definitely people of a large, like a critical mass, will gravitate to those like them. So we're just trying to introduce in a nice, soft way. It's not mandatory, but just these are other things that you can do and people that you can meet, because it does enrich everyone's life, right? The information we learn from newcomers, the skills and the opportunities that they have, the experience, life experience that they have, are wonderful, powerful information for us to have, and then they as well learning from us. So I think I see it as a very reciprocal relationship, and I think once we also foster awareness in the community about what we're trying to do, because at the end of it, at the end of the day, I hate using that word, but that quote, but I am. Successful integration means that people will stay. They'll be comfortable. There'll be less mental health issues. All of those kinds of things, and so those are concerns.
Yeah, I just always keep telling people if they want to integrate, you have to cut your bonds, so to say, and you have to really talk to Canadians. Like at the beginning, I didn't sit with Germans, and they were insulted because they thought it was weird that a German sits with Canadians. Lots of people don't feel comfortable being embarrassed, of course, and kind of going out of your comfort zone, but you have to force yourself, so to say, and that is really the only way to talk and practice the language and the culture. I mean, I think that English classes are helpful, but I don't think they're very effective in the long term. They're good for the beginning to kind of build up your grammar and everything, but we have people here that are in Canada for many, many years, and they just go to English classes, they go home, and they're in their comfort zone again. They talk English in the family, they have their friends, they're all German. Their workplace is German. It's all German.
I was going to say one other thing, and that has to do with the language that we are seeing now. People are coming because of the language requirement being much higher. We're seeing that as a positive thing for people from a settlement perspective. I believe it's important for people to have the language skills that they need. It's much more difficult to come here with no language, no English skills, than to have a higher level. It helps the individual, it helps the family immensely. So, and that's what we have seen too. And I know that there's some controversy about, language levels being raised, and it's really, I think, it's not to punish newcomers from coming here, it's to help them settle. So I guess that would be the message that I'd like to leave with. Yeah. They are definitely faith-based, and there are, what I would probably venture to say, without pigeonholing too much, because again, I can't speak for them, I'm not in the churches and haven't been attending, but there are some very conservative beliefs and strong, stringent, and then there are those that come from Germany who are going to the churches, the Canadian churches, right? So there, it's sort of a variety. I think probably what you see with the larger churches, and I think that those large buildings is that, everyone who comes from Germany goes to that church, and it's not really that way. And there is a blend of ultra conservative and just even by their clothing, their attire, you can you can really tell sort of where people fit. Yeah. And I think, and I don't mean that to sound in any way negative, it's just an observation that we've had, There will be some that will wear dresses or skirts, and then there will be some that wear pants. The ones that are not wearing pants, usually part of the more conservative Pentecostal type church group. So I started in 2002, and so the movement, the initial move here for the German countries had already occurred in 4 years prior. So, but what's interesting, I think, is that when I came on board, I came here to look at, I wanted to deal with or work with literacy and EAL. Literacy programs had been in this area for 20 years prior, or well, 10 years prior. 1989 is when the literacy programs came into being to meet the needs of those people migrating or immigrating from Paraguay and South and Central Mexico. So it was felt that the literacy classes, the existence of those classes, would be also a good fit for the newcomers that came here to learn English. What we learned after was it's entirely different. It's English as an additional language. It's not literacy. The newcomers were literate in their first language, so it wasn't literacy they needed. What they needed to do is transfer what they had in their language into English. So they had grammar, they had the core needs of a language base. So the EAL program was developed shortly after they came, and so that was new, was sort of added on to the literacy classes, and they still exist today. There's literacy classes and EAL classes, and they're very separate.
I do have 3 women in my ladies group right now. I have a weekly ladies group where they can practice their English. They are very new here, not even a year, I believe, and they have a hard time sort of integrating. They always tell me that they want to learn English, but they kind of refuse. Like, they always run to me and say, can you go to that person, ask them in English if they can do that for me? Like, and I know they can speak English, and I always keep telling them, you just have to sort of jump in the cold water and be prepared for being embarrassed, so to say, and it's very hard for them. And if I tell them how hard it was for me to integrate, it makes them feel more comfortable with me in a way. Like, that's what I noticed before my ladies group starts, when I talk German to them a bit and ask them about their day and what's different. And even if they tell me that they got a package from Germany and there was like little things and we're so excited about it because we haven't tasted it for a while, like little candies or whatever, we all get really excited, and that makes us like very bonded. It sounds weird, but it's just, the world is so small. You were both from the same country and now you're here in the same area. And
so the first families, now mind you, I wasn't around at that time, so a lot of what I'm telling you is things that I read. I came on a little bit later, but the similarities were sort of in I think the faith-based piece, that was a good fit. The language piece, that was a good fit. There were a lot of people here who had similar backgrounds from immigration years ago, their forefathers. So even some of the cultural and some of the values that people had it was a good fit, work ethic, some of the skills and abilities. The language is also a fit because there were people here that still retained some of the High German language, so that it was felt that English wouldn't be, the lack of English skills wouldn't be as high an issue that it might be in another community. So, and so that was sort of, I think, some of the things that sort of the moon and the stars, everything sort of aligned that this group was just moving them in here, and it was more of it was as probably seamless an immigration movement as I've seen than with other cultures. Even the climate, so the landscape, for some coming to Manitoba and the cold weather wasn't a deal breaker for them. For me, it's admiration of the people that are coming here and risking so much to change their life completely, to move to a completely different country, to not have the language level that they need in order to survive, to take entry-level jobs, to have a better life for their kids. knowing that they may be giving up a good paying job that they have, or a field, a career that they have, and working in something that they're not accustomed to. Like an accountant who ends up working in a manufacturing position where he's working with wood and his hands they're not calloused, and they're not hands that have done this before, but taking those jobs to build that better life. I think that's amazing. And then we have on the other spectrum somebody who has come here, was working in a trade. We'll use electricians as an example. Had almost the right amount of language, had managed to connect with the right people, and which was us, and studied hard and got his Red Seal here in Canada. That was huge, I thought, that there was a person who worked in that field and then came here and then was able to do the work that he was trained in and was good at, right? So I like to hear some of those success stories. We often talk about trades qualifications and how there's not necessarily a fit with people, but there are some cases where it works out really, really well. So the entrepreneurial spirit that I see, and the stick-to-itiveness, it's amazing. For the most part, the retention here is good and is high, and I consider that likely because of that first critical mass of people that came, those first 50 families here, their good experience, their success here, and then they're bringing family and friends, the word of mouth that came back. So I guess that sort of, I don't know if that sums it up, but there's always going to be some sad stories too. We have families who move back, who just can't, and it's surprising that it's not even a year or two later. It's like 7 years later, and I'm moving back. And you're thinking, wow, you've had 7 years to get settled and you're not settled. The story of settlement isn't, well, you've lived here for 3 years, you're settled, you're a Canadian citizen, that's good. It just doesn't work that way. It can take so many years, if ever. So there's some good stories, some sad stories, but I think the risk of changing things over to improve life for someone else is amazing to me, that people would do that.